3 crying kittens attack the puppy, trying to save them, but this isn't your typical rescue story. When tiny Milo finds 3 abandoned kittens by a flooding riverbank, he thinks he's their hero. Instead, they scratch his face, hiss at his kindness, and reject every attempt to help. But Milo won't give up, even as the storm waters rise and danger closes in. A grieving widow named Elena discovers them all, a wounded puppy still protecting the very kittens that hurt him. As she brings them home, something extraordinary begins to unfold. These aren't just animals finding shelter, they're broken souls learning to trust again. But when a vicious wild dog threatens everything they've built, Milo must choose between his safety and his newfound family. Will love conquer fear? Can the smallest acts of courage heal the deepest wounds? And what happens when those who fight us most become the ones who need us most? The storm clouds gathered thick and heavy over the small rural town as dawn struggled to break through the gray. Milo stirred beneath the sagging porch of what had once been Miller's General Store, now boarded up like so many other buildings on Main Street. His stomach cramped with familiar hunger, but the sound that had woken him pulled him to his feet, crying, weak and desperate, coming from the direction of Willow Creek. The puppy's brown eyes scanned the empty street. Rain began to fall in fat drops, each one cold against his thin coat. He should find better shelter, should worry about his own survival. But those cries, they sounded so small, so scared. Milo's paws carried him toward the sound before his mind could argue. Past the rusted mailboxes, beyond the last streetlight, down the muddy path that led to the creek. The voices grew clearer, not one, but 3 distinct cries, high-pitched and frantic. Through the reeds and tall grass, Milo spotted it, a wicker basket, tilted precariously near the water's edge. The creek, normally a gentle trickle, now rushed with storm runoff, lapping dangerously close to the basket's rim. Inside, 3 tiny kittens huddled together, their fur soaked and matted. One was orange and white, another solid black, the third a calico mix. They couldn't be more than a few weeks old, eyes barely open, crying for warmth and milk and safety. Milo approached slowly, whimpering soft encouragement. He'd never seen creatures so small, so helpless. His tail wagged tentatively as he stretched his nose toward the basket. The orange kitten struck first. Tiny claws raked across Milo's snout, drawing thin lines of blood. The black kitten hissed, arching its miniature back. The calico joined in, spitting and scratching at the air. Pain shot through Milo's nose, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he whined gently, trying to communicate that he meant no harm. The kittens attacked again, claws finding purchase on his ears. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the leaves and turning the creek into a churning brown torrent. Water crept higher up the muddy bank, inching toward the basket. Milo barked urgently, circling the wicker container as the kittens continued their frightened assault. His barks echoed across the empty fields, desperate and commanding. If anyone was out there, anyone at all, they had to hear. The basket rocked slightly as the water nudged its base. Elena Martinez paused on the road, shifting her cloth shopping bag to her other arm. She'd been walking back from Henderson's market, taking the long way home as she always did these days. The short route past the church where David's funeral had been held, where sympathetic neighbors still gathered to whisper about poor Elena, all alone now. The barking reached her ears, frantic, pleading, an animal in distress. She hesitated. Getting involved meant opening herself to caring again, to the possibility of more loss. But the sound was so desperate, so urgent. Elena dropped her bag and ran toward the creek. Elena crashed through the underbrush, branches catching at her gray wool coat. The scene before her stopped her short, a small brown puppy, bloodied and determined, trying to nudge a basket away from rising floodwater while 3 tiny kittens fought him with everything they had. "Oh my God," she breathed. Without thinking, she waded into the shallow water, her sensible shoes squelching in the mud. The basket was heavier than expected, waterlogged and weighted with the kitten's desperation. She lifted it clear of the water just as a larger wave surged up the bank. Milo danced around her ankles, barking excitedly now that help had arrived. The kittens, however, only intensified their fear. They scratched at Elena's hands as she carried them, their cries becoming sharper, more panicked. "Shh, shh," she murmured, the words feeling foreign in her throat. She hadn't soothed anyone in months, hadn't needed to use her nurturing voice since David's final days in the hospital. The puppy followed as she hurried toward her cottage, his tail wagging despite the scratches covering his face. Elena's cottage was small but warm, all wood beams and soft lighting that David had installed himself. She set the basket near the fireplace and quickly gathered towels from the linen closet, her movements efficient despite the trembling in her hands. The kittens huddled together, still mewling pitifully. They were so small, so fragile. How long had they been out there? Who could abandon babies like this? Milo positioned himself between Elena and the basket, as if he were still protecting them. Blood from his scratches dripped onto the hearthstones, but his attention never wavered from the kittens. "You tried to save them," Elena whispered to him, kneeling down to examine his wounds. "Even when they hurt you, you didn't give up." The puppy's brown eyes met hers, full of concern and hope. When was the last time anyone had looked at her like that? As if she mattered, as if she could make a difference. She reached for the first aid kit David had kept under the kitchen sink. Elena cleaned Milo's scratches with gentle precision, remembering how she'd tended David's cuts from his woodworking projects. The puppy held still, occasionally licking her hand when she paused. The kittens had quieted slightly, exhaustion overcoming fear, but they still pressed against the far side of the basket whenever Elena approached. Their tiny ribs were visible beneath wet fur, and their cries had become weaker, more desperate. "They need milk," Elena said aloud, her voice echoing in the quiet cottage. "And warmth. And what?" She wasn't equipped for this. She'd never owned pets. David had been allergic to cats, and they'd always planned to get a dog someday. Now someday stretched before her, empty and purposeless. But looking at Milo's determined face, at the way he positioned himself protectively near the kittens despite their rejection, Elena felt something stir inside her chest. A flutter of purpose she hadn't experienced since the funeral. "I'll have to go back to town," she told Milo. "Get supplies." The puppy's tail thumped against the floor as if he understood. At Henderson's Market, Elena moved through the aisles with unprecedented purpose. Kitten formula, baby bottles, heating pads, blankets. Mrs. Patterson from the church auxiliary watched her with raised eyebrows, and Mr. Henderson himself commented on her unusual purchases. "Found some strays," Elena explained briefly, avoiding eye contact. "That's nice, dear, Mrs. Patterson said with the tone people used when they thought someone was losing their grip on reality. "Though you might consider the animal shelter. They have resources for—" "No." Elena cut her off, surprising them both with the firmness in her voice. "They're coming home with me." During the drive back, Elena's mind raced. What was she doing? She could barely take care of herself these days, let alone 4 animals. But when she pulled into her driveway and saw Milo's face pressed against the window, tail wagging frantically, she knew she couldn't turn back. Inside, she found the kittens exactly where she'd left them. But Milo had somehow managed to curl himself around the outside of the basket, forming a protective barrier with his small body. Elena transformed her kitchen table into a makeshift veterinary station. She warmed the formula to body temperature, testing it on her wrist the way she'd seen mothers do with bottles. The kitten's cries grew more insistent as the smell of milk filled the air. The first feeding was a disaster. The orange kitten, whom Elena had started thinking of as Rusty for his burnt orange fur, fought the bottle with tiny claws extended. Midnight, the solid black kitten, turned his head away stubbornly. Only Patches, the calico, accepted a few drops before joining her siblings in their protest. Milo watched from his spot by the hearth, whimpering encouragement. When Elena's frustration mounted and tears threatened, the puppy padded over and gently licked her ankle. "You're right," she told him, wiping her eyes. "Patience." On the second attempt, Rusty managed half an ounce. By evening, all 3 kittens had accepted small amounts of formula, though they still shrank from Elena's touch and hissed at any sudden movement. As night fell, Elena made a bed for them near the fireplace, layering blankets in a wooden crate David had built for storing magazines. Elena woke to chaos. The kittens had escaped their crate and were scattered around the living room. Patches perched precariously on the back of David's reading chair. Midnight had somehow climbed halfway up the curtains, and Rusty was attacking the tassels on a throw pillow with determination. Milo raced between them, herding them with gentle nudges and strategic positioning. When Patches wobbled dangerously on the chair back, he positioned himself directly below her, ready to break her fall. Elena couldn't help herself. She laughed. A real laugh, not the polite chuckles she'd manufactured for concerned neighbors. The sound felt rusty in her throat, but genuine. "What are you 3 up to?" she asked, scooping Midnight from the curtains. To her amazement, he didn't hiss. Instead, he nestled briefly against her palm before his natural wariness returned. Progress. She made coffee and watched Milo orchestrate the morning chaos with admirable patience. When Rusty pounced on the puppy's tail, Milo simply wagged it more enthusiastically, turning aggression into play. When Patches tried to squeeze behind the bookshelf, Milo gently blocked her path and guided her back to safer territory. Elena found David's camera in the hall closet, wrapped in the soft cloth he'd used to protect the lens. She hadn't touched it since his death, couldn't bear to see the world through his eyes. But something about Milo's unwavering devotion to the kittens made her want to document their progress. The first photo captured Rusty mid-pounce, attacking Milo's ear while the patient puppy held perfectly still. The second showed all 3 kittens curled against Milo's side, their earlier hostility forgotten in sleep. The third made Elena's heart squeeze, Milo grooming Patches' fur while she purred for the first time since the rescue. That afternoon, Elena surprised herself by walking to the community center and posting one photo on the bulletin board. "New family finding their way," she wrote beneath it. By evening, she had 3 voicemails from neighbors she hadn't spoken to in months. The pharmacist's wife wanted to know about the animals. The librarian asked if Elena needed help with pet supplies. Even her estranged sister called from Phoenix, having seen the photo shared online. "Elena?" Maria's voice was tentative. "I saw. Are you okay?" For the first time in years, Elena could answer honestly, "I'm getting there." The response to the photo overwhelmed Elena. Children stopped her on the street to ask about the brave puppy and Mrs. Chen from the bakery brought over day-old pastries for your energy while caring for the babies. Elena began taking daily photos, documenting small victories. Midnight accepting scratches behind his ears. Rusty playing with a toy mouse instead of attacking furniture. Patches following Milo around the house like a devoted shadow. Each image told a story of gradual trust, of walls slowly crumbling. Elena saw parallels to her own thawing. She'd been as defensive as the kittens, as quick to scratch when people offered help. The transformation wasn't just in her pets. Elena found herself checking the mailbox with anticipation instead of dread. She returned phone calls. She even accepted Mrs. Patterson's invitation to the church potluck, though she'd asked to bring the animals along. "They're part of the family now," Elena explained. That evening, as she watched Milo patiently endure another kitten assault, this time Rusty practicing hunting techniques on the puppy's patient tail, Elena felt something she'd forgotten existed: contentment. The weather forecast had warned of severe thunderstorms, but Elena felt secure in her warm cottage with her growing family. She'd prepared carefully, flashlights charged, candles ready, extra blankets piled near the fireplace. The kittens, now 8 weeks old and fully weaned, had grown bold and curious. They explored every corner of the house, with Milo serving as their patient guardian and Elena as their devoted servant. When the storm hit, it struck with unexpected fury. Wind rattled the windows while rain lashed the roof. The kittens huddled together, their earlier bravery forgotten, but Milo stayed calm, his presence reassuring them. Elena was reading by lamplight when the first window blew open. The kitchen window, weakened by years of settling, burst inward with a crash of glass and a rush of cold wind. Rusty, always the boldest, panicked at the sudden noise and chaos. Before Elena could react, before Milo could intercept, the orange kitten bolted through the broken window into the storm. Elena's scream of horror mixed with the thunder as she watched her brave little fighter disappear into the darkness. Elena grabbed her emergency lantern and plunged into the storm, calling Rusty's name. The wind nearly knocked her sideways, and rain soaked through her clothes within seconds. But she could hear him terrified yowling from somewhere near the old oak tree. Milo shot past her, his smaller body cutting through the storm with determined efficiency. He reached the tree first, barking urgently at something Elena couldn't see in the darkness. She raised the lantern higher and her heart stopped. A large, mangy dog, wild and scarred from street fights, had cornered Rusty against the tree trunk. The kitten was pressed flat against the bark, back arched, fur standing on end, but he was trapped. The wild dog turned at their approach, its eyes reflecting the lantern light. Elena saw intelligence there, and calculation, and hunger. This wasn't a pet gone astray, this was a survivor who'd learned that the weak existed to feed the strong. Milo positioned himself between the wild dog and the kitten, every muscle in his small body tense. The size difference was comical if it weren't so terrifying. The wild dog outweighed Milo by at least 30 pounds, but Milo didn't back down. The standoff lasted only seconds before the wild dog lunged. Milo met the attack head-on, his small body colliding with the larger animal's chest. They rolled together in the mud, a blur of teeth and claws and desperate snarls. Elena screamed, looking frantically for a weapon, a stick, anything. She grabbed a fallen branch and swung it at the wild dog, catching him across the ribs. He yelped but didn't release Milo. The puppy's courage was absolute, but he was losing. Blood darkened his fur as the wild dog's teeth found purchase. Still, Milo fought on, driven by something deeper than self-preservation. Elena struck again, harder this time, and the wild dog finally retreated with a snarl of frustrated rage. He vanished into the storm as quickly as he'd appeared, leaving Elena kneeling in the mud beside Milo's still form. "No, no, no," she whispered, gathering the puppy into her arms. Blood seeped through his fur, and his breathing came in shallow pants. "Not you two. Please, not you two." Rusty crept closer, his orange fur muddy and bedraggled. For the first time since his rescue, he approached Elena without fear, pressing against her leg as if offering comfort. Elena worked through the night, cleaning Milo's wounds with shaking hands. The puppy lay still on towels spread across the kitchen table, conscious but weak. His breathing was labored, and she could see the deep puncture wounds along his neck and shoulder. Midnight and Patches joined Rusty in a vigil around the table. They took turns grooming Milo's uninjured paws, their small tongues working with surprising gentleness. The same kittens who'd attacked him at first sight now refused to leave his side. "Stay with us," Elena whispered, applying pressure to the worst wound. "You fought so hard for them, now fight for yourself." As dawn broke, gray and watery through the repaired window, Milo lifted his head slightly. His tail managed one weak wag when he saw the kittens surrounding him. Elena called the veterinarian, Dr. Morrison, who agreed to make a house call given the circumstances. While they waited, Elena found herself praying for the first time since David's diagnosis, not the bitter, desperate prayers of his final days, but grateful whispers of appreciation for the small, wounded warrior who'd taught her about unconditional love. Dr. Morrison arrived within the hour, a compact woman in her 50s who'd spent decades treating everything from prize cattle to beloved house cats. She examined Milo with gentle efficiency while Elena hovered anxiously nearby. "He's a fighter," the vet concluded, cleaning the wounds with professional thoroughness. "The bites look worse than they are, mostly muscle damage, nothing vital hit. He'll need antibiotics and rest, but he should make a full recovery." Elena's relief nearly buckled her knees. Dr. Morrison administered pain medication and antibiotics, showing Elena how to continue the treatment at home. That was incredibly brave, the veterinarian added, watching the kittens groom Milo's ears. I've seen grown dogs run from fights like that. This little guy has the heart of a lion. Over the following days, Elena became Milo's devoted nurse. She carried him to sunny spots in the garden, fed him by hand when he was too weak to stand, and slept on the couch to be near his makeshift bed. The kittens never left his side. They formed a protective circle around him, hissing at shadows and alert to every sound. Their transformation was complete, from frightened, aggressive babies to fierce guardians of their unlikely pack. During Milo's recovery, Elena found herself writing for the first time since David's death. Not the grocery lists and appointment reminders that had comprised her writing for months, but actual thoughts, real observations about love and loss and second chances. She penned a letter to the editor of the town newspaper, titled, "Love is Worth the Scars." In simple, heartfelt language, she described the storm rescue, Milo's courage, and the slow healing that had transformed her household. Sometimes the love we need comes clawing, hissing, fighting us at first, she wrote, but if we stay, if we give, it transforms us all. The letter ran on the front page of the weekly paper. By that afternoon, Elena's phone rang constantly. Neighbors she'd avoided for months called to check on Milo's progress. Children drew pictures of brave puppies and slipped them under her door. The local pet store delivered a box of toys and treats with a note, "For heroes." Most surprisingly, her daughter Sophia called from Denver. "Mom?" Sophia's voice carried uncertainty and hope in equal measure. "I read your article online. Can I come visit?" Sophia arrived on a Thursday, her rental car foreign and shiny in Elena's modest driveway. Elena watched through the window as her daughter sat motionless behind the wheel, gathering courage. The reunion was awkward at first. Sophia looked so much like David, same dark hair, same thoughtful eyes that Elena's breath caught. They hugged briefly, formally, years of hurt and misunderstanding between them. But the animals broke the ice as Elena had hoped they would. Milo, still moving carefully but determined to greet the visitor, limped over to sniff Sophia's hand. The kittens, now confident and playful, treated her like climbing equipment. "This is the famous hero?" Sophia asked, kneeling to pet Milo's ears. The puppy's tail wagged enthusiastically, his natural friendliness undiminished by recent trauma. "This is Milo," Elena confirmed. "And this is Rusty, the escape artist he saved. That's Midnight on your shoulder, and Patches is the one trying to untie your shoelaces." Sophia laughed, a sound Elena had almost forgotten. "They're wonderful, Mom. I can see why you needed them." The conversation that followed lasted until dawn, filled with tears and apologies and tentative steps toward understanding. The town organized a Heroes' Day picnic in honor of Milo and Elena's story. Elena hadn't attended community events since David's funeral, but Sophia's presence gave her courage, and she couldn't disappoint the children who'd been asking to meet the brave puppy. The park filled with neighbors Elena had avoided for months, but instead of pity in their eyes, she saw genuine warmth and acceptance. Her story had reminded them all of something important about love and second chances. Milo held court like a celebrity, accepting pets and treats with dignified grace. His wounds had healed into barely visible scars, but his legend had grown with each retelling. Children lined up to hear about the storm rescue, their eyes wide with admiration. The kittens, now confident young cats, supervised the proceedings with regal authority. Rusty had appointed himself Milo's bodyguard, positioning himself between the puppy and over-eager admirers. Midnight charmed the elderly ladies with his purring, while Patches entertained toddlers with acrobatic displays. Elena found herself laughing more in one afternoon than she had in the entire year since David's death. She was part of the community again, no longer the tragic figure to be pitied, but a neighbor to be celebrated. That evening, Elena and Sophia sat on the porch swing David had built during their first year in the house. The animals sprawled around them in comfortable exhaustion, the day's excitement having worn them out. "I was angry for so long," Sophia admitted quietly. "When Dad died, you just disappeared. I felt like I lost both parents that day." Elena nodded, tears threatening. "I didn't know how to be anything but David's wife. When he was gone, I forgot I was also your mother, also my own person." They talked about grief, about the different ways people heal, about the long road back from loss. Sophia spoke of her own struggles, her failed relationships, her fear of opening her heart fully to anyone. "These little ones taught me something," Elena said, watching Milo sleep peacefully between the 3 cats. "Love isn't about protecting yourself from loss. It's about choosing to care even when caring hurts." Inside the house, Elena retrieved David's photo from the mantel. For the first time since his death, she could look at his smiling face without overwhelming pain. "I think he'd approve," Sophia said softly. "I think so too." Elena returned to writing with a passion she'd thought lost forever. Her desk, covered in dust and silence since David's death, became alive with stories of healing and hope. She wrote about second chances, about the courage to love again, about finding family in unexpected places. Local magazines began accepting her pieces. A regional animal rescue organization asked her to write for their newsletter. The state newspaper commissioned a series on pet therapy and community healing. Milo and the cats became her willing subjects and constant companions. They posed for photographs, tolerated interviews with visiting reporters, and generally conducted themselves with the dignity of celebrities who'd never let fame go to their heads. Sophia extended her visit indefinitely, working remotely from Elena's spare bedroom while they rebuilt their relationship. The house that had been a tomb of memories became a home again, filled with laughter and purpose. Elena began planning a book, a collection of stories about animals and the humans who loved them. Publishers had already expressed interest based on her newspaper articles. The working title was "Love is Worth the Scars." The contract arrived on a Tuesday, official and exciting and terrifying all at once. Elena would become a published author, her story of healing and hope reaching readers across the country. She celebrated quietly with her family. Sophia, Milo, Rusty, Midnight, and Patches gathered around the kitchen table while Elena read the terms aloud. The advance wasn't enormous, but it was enough to ensure the animals' care and to fund Elena's new nonprofit organization, Second Chance Stories, dedicated to connecting shelter animals with grieving humans. "Dad would be so proud," Sophia said, wiping away happy tears. Elena looked around the table at her unlikely family. A year ago, she'd been alone with her grief, certain her story was over. Now, she was surrounded by love, messy, complicated, transformative love that had arrived in the form of 1 determined puppy and 3 frightened kittens. That night, she dreamed of David for the first time without sadness. In the dream, he was young and smiling, surrounded by animals of all kinds. He nodded approvingly when he saw Milo and the cats, as if he'd somehow orchestrated their meeting from beyond. "Take care of her," he seemed to say to Milo in the dream. And Elena knew he would. Spring arrived with unusual warmth, carpeting the meadow behind Elena's house with wildflowers. Elena took daily walks there now with Sophia and their 4-legged family, following paths that had grown over during her months of isolation. Milo led their processions with dignified authority, his scars barely visible beneath his glossy coat. The cats followed in order of seniority, Rusty the bold, Midnight the contemplative, Patches the playful, each having found their unique place in the pack hierarchy. Elena carried her camera on these walks, documenting not just the animals but the changing seasons, the returning life in both the landscape and herself. Her photos accompanied the stories she continued to write, creating a body of work that celebrated resilience in all its forms. Local schools invited Elena to speak about her experiences. Children listened with rapt attention as she described Milo's courage and the cat's transformation from fear to love. Many asked if they could start their own animal rescue projects. Start with kindness, Elena always told them. Sometimes the smallest acts of love create the biggest changes. Sophia had decided to relocate permanently, finding work with a Denver-based company that allowed full remote employment. The final scene opened on a bright Saturday morning. Elena woke to Patches purring on her chest while Rusty kneaded biscuits in her hair. Midnight stretched luxuriously at the foot of the bed, and Milo waited patiently by the bedroom door, tail wagging his morning greeting. Sophia was already up, making coffee in the kitchen and preparing the animals' breakfast. The domestic scene was so normal, so wonderfully ordinary, that Elena had to pause to appreciate it fully. After breakfast, they set out for their morning walk, Elena and Sophia side by side, talking about the day's plans, while their 4 companions explored the awakening world around them. Milo trotted ahead, occasionally looking back to make sure his charges were keeping up. In town, neighbors waved from their porches, and children called greetings to the hero dog. Milo accepted the attention graciously but never strayed far from his family. The cats, now wearing tiny harnesses Sophia had ordered online, walked with feline dignity that bordered on arrogance. Elena paused outside the community center, where her first photo had begun this journey. The bulletin board was covered now with pictures from other families, adoption announcements, birthday celebrations, memorial tributes to beloved pets. As they continued their walk, Elena reflected on the mysterious ways love finds us. A year ago, she'd been drowning in grief, certain her capacity for joy had died with David. But love had arrived in the form of one small, determined puppy who refused to abandon 3 frightened kittens. Sometimes, Elena said aloud, more to herself than to Sophia, the love we need comes clawing, hissing, fighting us at first. Sophia smiled, understanding, but if we stay, if we give, it transforms us all. Ahead of them, Milo paused to look back at his family, the widow who'd found purpose, the daughter who'd found forgiveness, the 3 cats who'd learned to trust. His brown eyes sparkled with contentment as he watched them approach. The morning sun caught the dew on the grass, transforming their path into something magical. Elena felt David's presence not as an absence but as a blessing, a gentle approval of the life she'd rebuilt from the ashes of grief. "This is what family looks like now," Elena whispered, her voice carried away on the spring breeze. And it was perfect, imperfect, unexpected, and absolutely perfect.